At the other end of Anzac Parade, across the lake, is the political capital of our nation, at least the building within which we exercise our political, economic and religious freedoms. But here is its soul. Here we honour and recognise the men and women who have underwritten those freedoms, which too often we take for granted. And it's not the building, nor the artefacts, nor relics that are exhibited within it, including some of those you've just seen in For Country for Nation, but it's the stories. Stories of 2 million Australian men and women who wear and have worn the uniform of the Royal Australian Navy, the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Air Force. There isn't, I think, an institution in this country that is more committed to equality than the Australian War Memorial. We reveal ourselves as a people here. I say to visitors, particularly the VIP visitors that come from other countries, it's hard to understand us until you come here. When the Chief of the Turkish Air Force stood with me in the commemorative area around that pool 2 years ago, pointing to one of the names in bronze where Australians have fought and died over 100 years, and he asked me why Australians had been there, I said, General, that's a very important question, because in answering it in your journey of discovery, you'll understand who we are. We have, as I said to former Prime Minister Tony Abbott when he proposed we might have an Arlington cemetery here in Canberra. I know him well from a previous life. I said, Tony, we love the Americans, but we're not Americans. We've got one man buried at the War Memorial. We've got no idea who he is. He's probably a private, a corporal, a sergeant, a sapper, a junior officer, perhaps a chaplain. He could be an Aboriginal Australian, but we know he's not a general. He's not an admiral or an air marshal. We're Australians. We revere the idealism, the heroism of the everyday Australian. We regard Australians here in particular as being equal. No rank, no race, no religion, no party politics. 102,700 Australian men and women, including Indigenous Australians and Muslim Australians, on that roll of honour. No rank, no military honours. Yet within that framework of equality, there is only one single place in this building that is named in honour of a person. And it's not Charles Bean, the founder, who was witness to the entire thing from the Gallipoli to Mont St Quentin, nor is it John Treloar, the first director. It's one man, and it's Captain Reg Saunders. Because in honouring him, we honour them all. Proud Aboriginal man who fought in the Second World War in Crete, New Guinea, Kapiong in Korea. Because as Graham Davison, the Professor of History at Monash University, wrote in The Uses and Abuses of Australian History, that ethical and responsible citizenship requires a number of things. And one of them is to be imbued with the imaginative capacity to see the world through the eyes of others. And I say to you as a non-Indigenous Australian, I can only imagine 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 generations after the first fleet arrives, with all of the devastation that would mean for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians, but from the origins of the Australia we've become. They were then seeking to enlist to fight for the young nation that had taken so much from them, denying their Aboriginality to do so. And one of the things which I presume Michael pointed out to you in For Country for Nation is the Rover Thomas painting of the Ruby Plains Massacre, one of a series of paintings he did through what he called the killing years from 1880 to 1920. In fact, we've just acquired only yesterday another work by Queenie Nakara Mackenzie of the Horso Creek Massacre. We'll be acquiring several more of these genre of very high quality works by acclaimed Indigenous artists, and we'll be doing it and displaying them for one reason in particular, to give our visitors a context of what Indigenous people endured before they would then seek to enlist to fight for our nation, Australia. And finally, just one of the elements in that For Country for Nation, just one of the very things that I think says it all in terms of your cause, which I strongly support, by the way, and that is an interview that was done by Private Charles Mean on the 1st of June 1944. It was published in the Tribune, and he was serving in the Second World War. He said, and I quote, "I know that I'm fighting for a new world in which my people will get a better deal. I want to come back to an Australia where my people will have full rights as citizens, to an Australia where Aboriginal children will have the right to education, to work, and to a healthy, happy life." In the 22 years that he served our country in the Australian Army, in the Second World War, the British Commonwealth and Occupational Forces, in Korea, where he was awarded a military medal, and the Malaysian emergency, the Malaya, nothing changed. His determination to find greater equality, education and rights and freedoms for his people, nothing changed. So I say to not necessarily those of you here this evening, but those who are perhaps not so supportive of this campaign, that we are all equal, but within that framework of equality, we can equally recognise some people in particular, and this particular group of Australians, and do so in our Constitution. As Thomas Jefferson observed, perhaps one of the greatest presidents, the third President of the United States of America, principal co-author of the American Declaration of Independence, and in putting that Constitution together, he made the observation that it would inevitably have to change, because as the human mind developed, as he said, it would be essential that the future generations would not be held hostage to the barbarous nature of their ancestors. It's not perhaps the way we describe it today, but anyway, thank you and welcome, and I look forward to hearing the discussion. Thank you.